you've been wondering how the German university system works, this is the video for you. Hello and welcome to the Deutsche Bildung channel. We offer student financing to EU students who want to come study here, or to German students who want to study either here or abroad. Today you'll find out everything you need to know about studying here in Germany. Usually it takes 3 to 6 years to get a degree here. Your studies are divided into a bachelor's and a master's program. Your bachelor's usually takes 3 years and then the master's takes an additional 2 years. This is the so-called Regelstudienzeit. But actually a lot of students take longer for their studies, so they might take 5 years to finish a bachelor's degree and then another 3 or so to do their master's. This is possible because, unlike at school, you can actually choose in which term you want to attend which lecture and so on. Another reason why loads of people decide to take a bit longer with studying is that it's actually affordable to do so, because the only thing you have to pay here are term fees, which are about 120 to 500 euros. That's a lot cheaper than most places worldwide. However, you still have to pay for your living expenses, which might get quite expensive. We have a detailed video on that in German on our channel, but if you want us to create that video in English as well, please let us know in the comments. If you would like to attend university, you need to show that you have sufficient university entrance qualifications. You can find out if your leaving certificate suffices on the Annabin website. The name's a bit weird, but it's actually an official German ministry website, and they have pretty much any leaving certificate that exists worldwide on there. If your qualifications suffice and you found a subject that you want to study, it is time to apply. Depending on the subject, you can either do that directly on the university website or through a nationwide portal such as hochschulstaat.de. There you need to submit your university entrance qualifications and sometimes also a CV or a language certificate or maybe even a letter of motivation. But for most people, the grade decides whether they get into their bachelor's program of choice. The so-called NC, or numerus clausus, determines how well your grade has to be in order for you to get in. It's a bit of a complicated system because the NC depends on the grades of all applicants, so nobody can tell you in advance how high your grade has to be. Nonetheless, if you look at the NCs of the past few years, you can usually get a feel of what kind of grade you might need. However, it is important that you apply either way, because you never know, you might get lucky and get in that year because the NC happens to be lower. Once you have been accepted to university, you'll get an admission letter, and then it's time to enroll. By the way, if you study a so-called zulassungsfreies Fach, so an admissions-free subject, you can just skip the application process and immediately enroll. Enrollment usually takes place in person at the university, and you need to supply your transcript of records, proof of health insurance, and other documents that are listed in your admissions letter. After that, you can officially call yourself a German university student. If you haven't done it already, now is the time to take a look at your study and examination regulations and your module handbook. These two documents are the most important documents of your entire studies because in them it's determined what kind of classes you have to take, maybe even when, and which classes count towards your final grade. Unfortunately, they are quite often written in a sort of convoluted and complicated language, which is a shame, but it is worth working your way through them because any and all questions that might come up during your studies will be answered in those documents. It's also really important to check if there is any modules or classes that you have to complete before you can take others, because if you don't know that in advance, you might end up having an additional term that you didn't plan for. Most programs consist of a core curriculum and then have additional specializations and a thesis at the end. There are 3 major types of classes at German universities: lectures, tutorials, and seminars. Lectures are when a professor stands in front of a class and basically talks for 90 minutes, so it's a lot of input, and as a student you're just required to listen and maybe take notes. Tutorials usually happen in a lot smaller groups, so maybe 10 to 30 people depending on your program, and you might not have a professor teaching it but just an older student. And tutorials are really there for you to ask questions, to take time with the learning materials and really understand them and do exercises. The third type of class are seminars, which happen in similarly small groups, and and the emphasis here really lies on discussions, which means you have to prepare a lot more and really make sure you work through the reading materials. Your studies will be graded in exams or assignments, presentations or reports. Exams usually take place at the end of a term and are just one big test with either multiple choice questions, single choice, short or long form answer, or even essay questions. Term papers are usually written during the semester break. They are written assignments that are about 10 to 20 pages long, where you examine a question that you choose according to a certain seminar you're taking. Term papers are required to adhere to academic standards, which mainly means you need to cite properly, and how that works you'll be taught at the beginning of your studies. Once you have successfully completed a class, you will get a so-called shine. Nowadays this is mostly digitized, so the class automatically shows up on your transcript of records. However, that isn't always the case. Your transcript of records shows every class you've taken that counts towards your degree, including your grade and also ECTS points. My recommendation is to not worry about the ECTS points too much. Just know that during your bachelor's degree you collect 180 ECTS points, and during your master's 120. A major difference between studying in Germany and the UK or the US is that you really are responsible for your own studies. That means that, for example, deadlines won't necessarily be communicated to you, but you need to actively look for that information on university websites and the like. So I highly recommend familiarising yourself with any website or portal that your degree might use. However, this responsibility also gives you a lot of freedom of arranging your studies exactly the way you want. And as a side note, the less time you need for organising your studies, the more time you have to enjoy them.